Welcome, everyone. My name is Lisa Itzkowitz. I'm from the New Rochelle Public Library, and thank you for joining us for getting started with native gardening. On behalf of my fellow colleagues at a variety of libraries, Dobbs Ferry, Katona, Mount Kisco, Ruth Keeler Memorial, Tuckahoe, and Yonkers, we're thrilled to see so many of you here. This program is presented with Healthy Yards New Rochelle, and in a moment you'll hear from the co-president of Healthy Yards New Rochelle is going to present our presenters. I'm just going to give one plug for all the libraries. We encourage everyone to look on the websites of all our libraries, and you can, Westchester Library System is 38 libraries, and you can use your card at any of them. You can attend programs. So me and my colleagues will put our URLs in the chat, and we encourage you to check out all the things that are going on at each of our libraries. The presentation is going to run maybe 45, 55 minutes, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. If you have questions during the program, you can put them in the chat, and we will, they may get answered before the end, and if not, we will address them at the end as time allows. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to Bob Finkelstein, the co-president of Healthy Yards New Rochelle, and he will introduce our tonight's presenters, Mark and Natali.
Thank you, Lisa, and partner libraries for co-hosting our event this evening. Healthy Yards New Rochelle is an organization with a goal to promote pesticide and chemical-free gardens and the planting of native and pollinator plants. To receive information on our future events and topics of interest and receive our quarterly newsletter, we will provide our email address in the chat. And if you could just send us your email address and your interest, we will add you and keep you apprised of what's going on. Also, please check our Facebook page. We constantly post topics and items of interest. Tonight's presentation on how to start a native garden will cover resources, techniques, and recommendations to demystify the process and get you on a path to a vibrant and eco-friendly garden. Our presenters are Mark Napier and Natali Meytin, New Rochelle homeowners with a shared passion for gardening that benefits both humans and wildlife. Mark brings an art and tech background and developed the Healthy Yards New Rochelle Resources site from which they're going to draw a lot of their information. And Natali specializes in marketing and advertising and has coordinated our open garden tours for the past 2 years. I've been to the yard several times, and it's beautiful, and they are such great hosts and presenters on how they've managed to achieve what they have in their yard. As self-educated gardeners, they've gained 6 years of hands-on experience in native plant gardening through reading, trial and error, which is big for a lot of us, and sharing knowledge with other passionate gardeners. Both are members of our Garden Buddy team, available to provide in-person or virtual suggestions on how to get started. And at this time, I'm pleased to turn the program over to Mark and Natali.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Bob. Thanks to the library and Healthy Yards New Rochelle for putting this all together, putting a series together of talks that give us a chance to share information. You may have to pardon me at times. I have been struggling with a cough now for about a week, so every now and then it gets better of me. So I'm Mark Napier. Natali Meytin is here as well, and we are going to talk to you about, as the title says, getting started with native gardening. There's a number of different, I think Bob used the word demystify, which I think is a great term here, because there is often this question when people come to us and see our garden, say, where do I start? And there seems to be so many different things that you need to learn to do this. But I really want to emphasize here, Natali and I are self-taught. We're not botanists. We're not biologists. We're not forestry people. We are regular people that own some land and wanted to do the best we could for the environment that we live in. Healthy Yards is sort of a starting point for that, of creating an environment that's healthy, not just for humans, but also for wildlife. And ultimately beautiful and fun as well. So we're going to dive into this subject. As Lisa mentioned, if you have questions as we go, put them in the chat. If it's something that I can address as I'm speaking, I will. Otherwise, we'll pick them up at the end. And before we get too far into any of this, I want to point to two resources. Bob mentioned a resource guide. These are sites that I put together, Native Garden Guide. Don't worry about the caps there. I just put in caps to make it a little clearer. That site has all the information that I'm going to be covering in this talk. So if you're worried about missing something, if you're furiously writing down notes, that page, that web page is like effectively a cheat sheet of everything that Natali and I have learned over the past several years. Tips, techniques, basically how to, as condensed and as clear and simple as possible. There's also the Healthy Yards New Rochelle.org. And that is, as Bob mentioned, that also has more information about Healthy Yards, the New Rochelle chapter of it, as well as pointers to some Facebook site, Facebook group, the group particularly for Healthy Yards, and numerous other resources. Healthy Yard, maybe you've seen these signs. I hope you do. I hope you see more of them. This is a sign in our front yard. Just basically our way of saying that we care about the environment, not only for the wildlife and insects, but also for ourselves. We don't want to live in an environment that has poisons in it. So if all goes well, we will see many more of those signs showing up on people's front lawns over the coming years. So Natali and I, how we got started, we bought a house together in New Rochelle, not too far from here. Not too far from here, meaning the library. Really, as we were on Zoom, I'm thinking as if I'm in the library. No, yeah. we're on Zoom. It could be anywhere, but we're in the not too far from the train station. To clarify that, we bought this property at this point. It's about 6 years ago or so, and we have a before picture up there at the top. It was a very bare yard. It's kind of like a lot of the yards that you see when you're walking around in the suburban areas here. A lot of grass, effectively like a box of grass with just a small border around it of some shrubs. And the plants that we did have there were ones that are very common in the suburbs. We had hostas, we had a couple of rows of Sharons, hydrangeas, periwinkle, English ivy, privet, euonymus. We had tons of daylilies that were growing invasively in an area of the yard. And I just thought this is normal. When we got the house, this reminded me of the plants that I saw when I was growing up. My mother was an avid gardener, and we had English ivy, we had periwinkle, we had all these plants. So we started planting and planted even some more of the same plants. I remember putting in periwinkle, which I came to regret later when it spread. What I didn't realize until we read an article, read a New York Times article that talked about native plants and the importance of native plants. And then I did an inventory of our property and realized that we had about 98% of the plants we had were from either Asia or Europe. We had a mountain laurel, and we had an oak tree, and that was really about it, other than we had some black-eyed Susans that were growing like as weeds in the hedge. So this was a revelation to me. I really didn't recognize that many of the plants that I just assumed were like normal plants actually have they're foreign plants. They have no place being in the Northeast US. They're only here because people brought them here. So after 5 years, this is a photograph, the after lower photograph. At this point, 80% of our garden is native plants. We made a commitment to reach at least 75% in a couple of years. And we're tracking. I have a spreadsheet, actually. I track all the plants we plant. So I know the number of plants and the different varieties. And at this point now, we see almost every day that I go out, we're seeing birds, insects that we haven't seen before. There's always surprises when you're growing native plants. You learn things about the wildlife and the environment, because insects and birds are attracted to the food sources. that native plants provide. So why native plants? Maybe some of you are already on board with this and know this, but I want to make sure that we all understand the importance of native plants. Native plants have evolved in step with our environment over millions of years, which means that the insects, the birds, the wildlife have learned how to use these particular plants, either for food, for nesting materials, for shelter. So these plants are providing the necessary foundation for insects and wildlife in our area. They're well adapted to our environment. They support pollinators, for example. You probably might have read, I have a link there reading about insect population decline. This is something that's going on now for the past couple of decades. Without the right sources of food, insects die. If you think of an insect, its digestive system is maybe like, a few millimeters long. They usually are specialized around a specific plant, which means if they don't have that plant, they just die. They're not omnivores like humans. If the Italian restaurant closes, we can order out Chinese. It's that simple for us, but insects don't have this kind of flexibility. So they really need the plants that they have specialized on. If they don't have them, the population of insects declines, which ultimately impacts humans as well. Value for people, for us, that it's easier to garden with native plants. They don't need as much water, for example. They're drought tolerant. Many of them are deer resistant if you have if you have deer in your area. And ultimately, they bring beauty to our yards. They're bringing the color and the variety of plant life, and then the birds and the insects, which can be a ton of fun. Once you get out and start to know the creatures that live in our neighborhood, you learn all kinds of things about the natural environment around us. Conversely, to natives, you have invasive plants. And sometimes you might hear people say, well, a plant is invasive, like Virginia creeper is a vine. People say it grows invasively. Or even milkweed, like common milkweed, people might say it's invasive. It's not really a good term to use in that case. Those are plants that are native, but are just very aggressive. They grow and spread very readily. Invasive means a plant that comes from another continent in most cases, versus the plants that have evolved naturally in their own environment. So the plants that we would call native are the ones that have they've evolved for us, in our case, say the Northeast US, without any human intervention, versus a foreign plant which had to take a plane or a boat or an airplane to get here. So if you think of it that way, if a human had to carry the plant and bring it in to our region, then it is a foreign plant, and invasive if it then spreads and takes over the environment in which it exists. The reason why they can take over is nothing's eating. Remember what I said about insects specializing on certain plants. These plants that are coming from Asia, from Europe, or sometimes Africa or South America, it's very possible that nothing here is going to eat them. No insects will recognize them. Pathogens, funguses, things like this don't recognize these plants. So the plants don't have any holes in them. That's one thing that I noticed that's interesting. A couple of examples here of common invasive plants. Pachysandra, if you look at that, you say, wow, that's really a beautiful picture. How did they get it so there's not a single hole in any leaf? It's because insects don't eat Pachysandra. English ivy, similar. Periwinkle, which we planted and then had to pull out because it gradually exterminated an area of our garden as it spread, created a sort of a dead zone where nothing but the periwinkle could grow. It crowded out all other plants and prevented new plants from sprouting in that area. A lot of these I grew up with. Japanese honeysuckle, never knew, although the name would tell you it's Japanese. I didn't realize they really meant it. It is from Japan. is not from this part of the world. So at this point, okay, you're ready to go with native plants. Where do you start? This is, as I said, this is a question we hear all the time. I like to use this photograph as inspiration. You can start a native garden with a single native plant. If you have 1 square foot, you can get a plant. In this case, this is a photograph of plants that we put in. These were 2 butterfly weed plants from Tony's nursery. Tony's nursery here on Main Street between New Rochelle and Larchmont. They have a pretty good native section. I bought these 2 to help support monarch butterflies because the monarch butterfly caterpillar specifically needs milkweed to feed on. It's a specialist. It needs this exact plant and can't eat anything else. So I bought these 2, and while I was digging the hole, I saw this monarch butterfly land on and lay eggs on one of the plants. You can't tell in the picture, but the plant was still in its pot. I hadn't even planted it yet. So if you plant them, they will come. This butterfly found this plant, and I'm very confident that in a mile radius of our house, there is no milkweed. I've walked around and looked because I like to know who's planting what. I've not seen a single milkweed plant anywhere in our neighborhood. So this butterfly managed to, I guess, smell it and find it and lay eggs on it. This is the beginning of a native plant garden, and it really can be that simple. It's just up to you how much time you have, how much effort you can put into it, but you don't have to create a national park. You can do this in an afternoon if you want to. Probably the biggest question around native plants is how to choose from them. There are thousands of plants. I read about plants almost every single day for years now. Natali and I are constantly exchanging notes on plants that we read about. I'm still seeing plants and learning about plants that I've never heard of before. But to choose so you don't get overwhelmed, the best thing you can do is break it down. And really you're breaking it down at first by just 3 main areas. You look at what's called your garden biome. Biome, if you're not familiar with the word, it effectively just means like the type of environment that your garden is. Is it a grassland? Is it a woodland? Is it a wetland? So that's sort of broadly, what do you think your garden is? What do you want it to look like? Then the level of sunlight and the level of moisture, which are generally pretty clear cut when you start to observe your garden. So you start by observing your garden conditions and look for what sorts of conditions are you seeing in your property. For example, on the far right here, we have woodland. So you have shaded areas, generally moist, generally, lots of ferns, lots of deep green, a cool kind of feel to the environment. In the middle, grassland, a lot of sun, lower plants, generally a lot of color from wildflowers. On the far left, a little harder to tell there, but that's like a rock garden, very dry, maybe sandy, gravelly soil, almost leaning to desert conditions. And I don't have a picture here, but wetland. So what you do is you look at your garden conditions and just watch it. Look in the morning and see where is the sun. Where is it? Where do you have bright light? Where do you have shade? Look again in the middle of the day, see where the sun is at that time. And then at the end of the day, afternoon, evening, and see where the sun is. Get a sense of how much time you have sun shining in different areas of your yard and how much shade is there. If you're seeing sun for 6 hours or more, you'd say that's a full sun area. If you're seeing mostly shade, maybe only 2 hours of sunlight, and then either full shade or dappled shade, then you're talking about more like woodland plants would probably be at home there. Also, after it rains, I often go outside during the rain. I go out in boots and an umbrella, and I just watch where the water's flowing to see where is it puddling. Partly because I don't want it puddling into my basement, so that's half of it. But the other half is understanding where is the garden most wet, and versus where does it get very little rain. If you see puddles, if you see after rainfall, puddles that linger maybe for several hours or even linger into the next day, you maybe have more of like a rain garden kind of conditions or wetland kind of conditions that you would plant plants that favor that kind of environment. Also, like we have a section in our yard that has rock and shallow soil, and even if we have pouring rain for days, within about 1 or 2 days of bright sunlight, the soil already starts to dry out there because the water just pours out and drains out from this shallow, rocky soil. So these are things you want to be aware of. The idea here is you want to match the plants to your conditions. You don't want to go to a nursery and start window shopping and say, oh, here's a beautiful pink plant. We love pink. Let's put that in. And you put it in, and a year later it's dead because it's not the right plant for those conditions. Natalie and I did exactly that. We sort of went window shopping. It's like, oh, let's, pretty colors, pretty flowers. Let's try it out, and ended up with plants that were not suitable for the places that we were putting them. So start by looking at your property, and then we'll look at how to match plants to your conditions. There's a lot of different resources online. I'm going to call out one specifically, which is prairienursery.com. This is an online nursery. I'm not trying to sell anything here. I do not have stock in this company. I just want to point you to a company that has a very good search engine where you can go and learn about plants. And it's just a very easy way. I often go there to learn what kinds of plants I could put in my yard and to search through what the options are. I'm going to go into this link and we'll just take a look around. So I just went in. I'm actually just on this page. This is Prairie Nursery. They are an online nursery, and I just want to make, I'm not sure everyone realizes this, but buying plants online is a very viable option. At first, I was skeptical because I thought they're going to arrive dead in the mail, but we've had no problem. Natalie and I have planted probably at this point a couple hundred plants that we've gotten from online sources, this company and others. If you go to nativegardenguide.org, I have a couple listed there as well. The great thing about this is they have this wonderful organization. You can easily go in and see what the plants look like. This is one that I've tried recently. I put it in the fall, and I'm going to see how it does in the spring, but it tells you what kind of soil it prefers. Moisture, in this case, likes more moist environment. Full sun, it's a low plant, only up to maybe 2 feet tall when it blooms. Does mention zones. We're in zone 7, just an FYI. If you're wondering what zones are, they're just basically the hardiness zone, meaning how north or south are we, how warm or cool in general is our environment. We're in 7, which tells me this plant is maybe not ideal, but I'm trying it anyway. I think it's going to work out okay. And here's an interesting thing to take a look at. I go here and look at the range map, and it shows you in bright green where the plant is native. This is actually, I believe, a government source. I've seen this exact same map in a number of different contexts. You can see up here in New York State, it is native in New York State. It's towards the north, doesn't really like the warmer conditions down south. Just tells me something about the plant and where it prefers to grow. And we're probably, down here, closer to Long Island, we're near the southern tip of what this plant prefers. Other things we can do, if we go in here, I'm gonna go back and let's just go in here. You can search by all kinds of things. This is great. If I say bloom color and I say I want yellow, and I like soil type, not soil type, sorry, soil moisture, let's say dry. And I'm gonna say sun exposure, full sun. And then I get a list of plants. And they're yellow, which is wonderful. So it helps you to take this seemingly huge question of what are good plants for my conditions and narrow that down. Here's one, black-eyed Susan. This was one that I had growing on my property. We dug this out, Natalie and I dug this out of our hedge. It was growing in effect like a weed, but really loves the whole eastern area of the country. If you look at the range map here, you can see this plant is highly adaptable to all sorts of conditions in the US. And when you look over soil moisture, dry, medium, moist, full sun, partial shade, variety of soil types, very, very adaptable plant that is actually one of the few natives that I see growing around in the area here on its own. I see a comment there, Prairie Moon. Prairie Moon also has a very, very good search engine. And there are all sorts of resources out there. Lady Bird Johnson is a wonderful site. If you go to nativegardenguide.org, I do have a number of different resources there. Audubon has lists of native plants, Xerces Society as well. There's a lot of different places where you can get ideas to get you started. Also, something I didn't mention, but Prairie Nursery has packages of plants that you can purchase where they've done the thinking for you. If you say, okay, I have a full sun area or a very dry area, or you can specify the conditions and find in their site prepackaged garden bundles that saves you a lot of thinking time. Just need to put them in the ground. Also note here, order in January. We're already getting near the end of January, February, but when I was on Prairie Nursery just a couple days ago, I already noticed that some of the plants were sold out. This is the time to buy them. They will ship them in the spring. You can specify a week, so you know you're around that week. They'll ship the plants to you when they're ready to be put in the ground. So you'll get them at the right time in the spring, but you want to order them now before they sell out. So I mentioned, think about what sort of yard you want to have. Do you want to have more of a woodland, more of a meadow? We talked about sun and we talked about wetland, shade, these different conditions. How moist is it? How sunny is it? Another way to think of plants to help you kind of narrow down what you're looking for. Think of 3 layers of plants. Think of the plants you're putting in your garden as ground cover, which is very low, close to the ground, medium height flowering plants, and then taller plants that provide more shape and structure in the garden. So here's some examples of ground covers. These ones we've used in our garden and had a great deal of success with. They're very hardy plants. This dwarf crested iris is really beautiful, especially in the spring when it's making these sort of miniature irises. Foam flower is this sort of glowy white flower in the spring, and wild ginger makes a really beautiful, dense green cover. These are all great for shade. They help cover the soil. They give you a layer that helps hold together the, prevent erosion, keep the soil tightly together. Also, they're hiding the sunlight from the ground, which keeps the ground cooler, but also helps prevent weed growth. So when you have a nice ground cover that's grown in, you don't have to worry so much about mulching your garden, because this is what they often call green mulch. It's a plant that covers the ground the way mulch would and helps manage the dryness of the soil as well. So makes your life a lot easier than worrying about mulch and changing mulch around every year. For sun, we've used wild strawberry. It's been very, very successful for us. Prairie smoke is one that is actually not native to the Northeast. It's more of a Western plant, but I put it in a spot that had almost like desert conditions. It was so dry right next to our sidewalks. Doesn't get that much water, and I needed something that could survive there, and tried out this prairie smoke ground cover, which has done very well. And then I want to point out violets as well, which they're growing in your lawn, most likely if you have a lawn. What we've done is pull them out of the lawn where we find them and move them over into our flower beds, where they spread and create a beautiful ground cover in the especially in the spring, make these wonderful flowers. It's great to see. Here's a case: violets, insects love the leaves and they will chow down on them. So midsummer, a lot of times the violets have a ton of holes in the leaves. That just means insects are loving the party. You're throwing a party. It's like you've put out the hors d'oeuvres and everyone's chowing down on them. That's successful, right? And when you plant native plants, it's like you are providing food for insects. So when you see the holes in the plants, it's a good thing. It means you're helping out. And then just plant more of that plant. That way you have more leaves and the insects get their full. And Kathy, I noticed native plants that are actually native to New York. I agree. And we do that as much as possible. Amanda's Native Garden is a nursery that's based here in New York State. And that's always my first choice. If you can get plants that have been grown close to where we are, like actually in New York State or close by, Jersey, Connecticut, places like this, that's ideal. Can't always find them. It depends on the nursery and what they're stocking, what they have available. So I like to be flexible and try to do the best first and get the plants closest to where we are. And then if not, spread out a little bit and look at what else is out there. So thinking of plants, 3 layers, we talked about ground cover. Medium height is where you get a lot of your color, and especially in sunny areas. These are all plants that we've had in our garden that have done very well. These are going to be plants, medium height. We're talking like 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, like in that range. Cone flowers can go up in height a little bit. Swamp milkweed maybe up to about 4 feet or so. But these bloom, Coreopsis, there's many different varieties. They bloom throughout the summer. Swamp milkweed blooms throughout the summer. This foxglove, not to be confused with European foxglove. It is, this would be Penstemon digitalis, also known as beard tongue, also known as foxglove, but it is a native plant. The European foxglove is a different thing altogether, not native to our area. So these are the plants that give you a lot of the color and the, a lot of the fun, especially in the summer, because that's where you're going to get most of your bloom time. The ground covers are often spring bloomers. And then a taller layer, looking at some plants like some of the goldenrods, not all of them. There are goldenrods that go up 4 or 5 feet or so. Some of them are lower. It depends on the goldenrod. False sunflower, ironweed, blue false indigo makes a nice shrub, kind of shrub-sized plant. And then there are your actual shrubs, your woody plants that'll give you height in the garden and also year-round structure. In this case, we have a picture here of winterberry, the ilex shrubs, the hollies, inkberry, Ilex glabra, serviceberry, chokeberry. These are the kind of plants that birds love. Serviceberry particularly can give you beautiful foliage in the fall and also blooms in the spring. And they can give you some height. serviceberry, go up 25 feet or so if you want that kind of height. You can also think about dogwoods. So it's this is the idea again of something close to the ground, something medium, middle height, and then taller could be 5 feet tall, could be tree height. It really just depends on what kind of shape you want to create for your garden. So if you thought about the conditions, sun and moisture, and you thought, what am I looking for? Am I looking for ground covers? Am I looking for middle or taller? Then you're in a place where you're ready to buy seedlings. There's many different possible sources, but if you're getting started, buying seedlings online is one of the easiest ways to get going and find the plants that you're looking for. As I mentioned, Prairie Nursery is one option there. There are other options as well. The Westchester Community College Native Plant Center has a great plant sale in April. If you join the Facebook groups, if you're not on them yet, if you join those and watch, someone will mention that as it comes up. It's good to keep an eye out for it because it can come and go quickly if you're not paying attention. There's a great way to find available plants and to buy them. Also, the native plant nurseries locally. There are as I mentioned, Tony's Nursery near us has a good native plant section. You do have to ask, because if you just walk in the door and start looking for plants, you're going to see a lot of farm plants. If you ask for where the native plant section is and go and take a look there, you can get to the ones that you actually want. If you're buying online, chances are you're going to be buying plugs. These are small plants, seedlings, usually, maybe 3-4 inches tall. And the great news there, even though they are very small, is that they're going to establish better in your garden than a full-size plant. You put in a full-size plant, let's say that you bought from a nursery, that plant has been in the nursery probably in ideal conditions. When you put it into your yard, it has to adjust and adapt to the conditions there. Versus when you buy plugs, you can plant those, they will immediately, they're young plants, they're expecting to grow out roots at that point, and they're going to immediately start to adapt to the conditions in your garden. They have a better chance of survival and a better chance of growing in longevity in your yard. So this is a great way to go. If you say you miss this window of opportunity, which is January, February now, to purchase online, you will find they'll probably be sold out. There's a very good chance by the time you get to April, May, those plants are already sold out. You will have another window of opportunity around July, August to buy plants again, which may sound counterintuitive, like why would I be putting in plants in the fall, like right before winter time? But actually it's a really good time to plant native plants. Native plants are adapted to winter, they're expecting to have winter. You may get something that looks like this, which looks like a very dead plant. First time Natalie and I saw this, we thought, this is crazy, why did we spend money for this? This is a joke. But in fact, they're not dead, they're dormant. These are roots. You will plant them following the instructions that you can find online. If you are buying online, you'll find them at the nursery. Otherwise, just look them up, Google it, and you will find how to plant bare root plants. Intuitively, pretty clear. You put them in the ground and water them and then wait for the spring to come. Over the winter, they are adapting to the soil. They will put out some new roots, and in the springtime, they're ready to go, which actually means come spring, they'll be in better shape, very possibly, than the fresh new plants that you put in. So definitely a great time to consider. You'd be planting, if you order around July, August, you'd be planting in October, September, October timeframe. So you've got some plants, you want to, you're ready to plant. let's say you have a garden bed, that's great. Maybe you just need to clear out some weeds. But if you don't have a garden bed, then there's a very good chance you have lawn, because lawn is everywhere in our environment. Lawn, by the way, fescue grass is not a native grass. It is a European plant, and it's only here because humans have put it here. So don't shed a tear when it comes time to remove it. You're removing something that's effectively barren to the environment and does not support very much insect life or wildlife. There are techniques. I have a link here to an article, also nativegardenguide.org. I'll say again, the same article is there, which can explain this better than I can in the time we have here. There's a number of different ways to remove grass. One of the most direct and simple that Natalie and I have used is to smother it, which means mow the grass very low, put layers of brown paper over it, and then pile mulch on top of that. And if you were to do this, say now, let's say like January, February, in about 6 months, 3-4 months if you're impatient, but probably 6 months is best. The grass underneath has smothered and is no longer alive. At that point, you have a mulch flower bed ready to go. You can just poke holes through the brown paper, or if you use cardboard, poke holes through it and plant plugs into that. Generally, you don't need to augment soil. This is not something that's necessary for native plants. If you're choosing plants that are Northeast natives, they are fine with the soil we have here. There's maybe more extreme cases if you have a ton of clay. If you have very highly clay soil, you might have to plan ahead. But there are plants that like clay as well. So again, you want to think about getting the right plants, choosing the right plants for your conditions, rather than trying to change the conditions to match the plants. At that point, plant them, and this is pretty intuitive, I think, as well. You don't bury the seedlings, you just put them in at the same level as the soil. Give them plenty of water after planting. You can use mulch at first to help manage weeds and moisture, but over time, I'd rather have a good ground cover than to have to keep replacing and managing mulch. Also, in the fall, the leaves are going to give you free mulch. Put in markers. This is a key. I can't think of how many times I've gone out in the spring and started weeding and seen some sort of strange plant coming up and just like, what is this? This shouldn't be here, and start pulling it out. And it's exactly the plants that I put in the fall before. So if I don't mark the spot, I forget that they're there. Also, when I want to plant the next round of plants, I often I'll start putting them in where I just put in plants from the fall. So you do want to put in markers to keep track of that. In the first year, you want to keep these moist. Like if you haven't had rain for, let's say, a week, you probably want to give your new plants water. You don't want them to dry out. Even if they're drought tolerant, as many of the native plants are, you still do want to give them the best conditions for that first year until their roots get down deeper into the soil, until their roots spread and establish, and then they'll be able to sustain themselves better through, dry, hot July conditions. And again, if you go, this is a link out to Prairie Nursery. They have excellent instructions on their page. So does Prairie Moon, also Amanda's Native Garden, 3 really excellent sources that also give you a lot of information. The great news about these businesses is they really want you to be successful, because it is not only their business, but it's also their passion and their mission. So they're going to give you really excellent information to help you get started. Mint, brown paper method to get rid of mint. I don't know, actually. That's a good question. Mint's very aggressive. I think you should probably pull it out. When it comes to like invasives like that, a lot of invasives have roots. Even if you cover them up, in some cases I've seen them covered up with pavement, literal asphalt. Somebody put a driveway over a bed of daylilies and the daylilies just grew right through it. So when it comes to invasives, if you already have invasives in your yard, there's a very good chance you have to do like more heavy duty surgery to remove them before you start putting in native plants. Final word here on longer term care, which is as you go forward, as once you've established a garden, less is more. If you're not sure what to do, just remember that these plants have been around for millions and millions of years. They've been here since before we showed up, and they were doing just fine before humans arrived. So they don't really need that much help from us. We might want to offer some assistance here and there. Maybe you want to manage how they bloom so you get more color, deadheading. Some plants, when you read the information about plants, like say Coreopsis, if you cut off the blooms after they're done blooming, they may bloom a second time, which is nice. But in general, you can just leave them alone. And in the wintertime, our native plant garden is full of stems, which we love. I think there's nothing more beautiful than plants, dried plants in snow. The stems will provide homes for native bees, as well as for other insects. And the birds will use those stems to make their nests. In the spring, we see birds commuting to and from our garden, pulling off shreds of fibers off of the milkweed and then lining their nests with that, which is, again, just fun to see that we're providing that resource for birds. So we have about 10 minutes before an hour. What I wanted to do was to talk about a specific case, just to give an example and kind of maybe make this a little bit more concrete. And I'm wondering if we have Penelope and or Phil in the room.
Yeah, we're here.
Penelope,
Hi.
how are you? Great to see you. Penelope and Phil.
Hi there.
Natali and I met with them just about, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago, I think. They're neighbors, they're interested in starting a garden. And like most people, they're okay, where do we start? There's certainly overwhelm here. Glad you could make it. And I just wanted to show a specific example. And I have this amazingly beautiful picture here of the stone rain garden. And I put this out and I thought, wait a minute, do I really want to show this picture? But then I thought, yes, I do, because all of our gardens start humbly. Like any garden, no matter how beautiful it may be, begins with some dirt. And so here we are with this possibility. So here's a picture of the front yard of Penelope and Phil's house. And when we met, we chatted about it. So again, like, let's just sort of step through some of these questions, like what kind of environment, like when you see this, Phil, Penelope, what kind of environment do you envision here? Like woodland, grassland, for example, which is it? What would you hope to see?
Grassland, I think, probably, or no, is that not right?
No, it's your choice, really. It's what you like. Because you could say, okay, we're going to put like 5 trees in this front yard, and that's the long-term vision. It's definitely like, yeah, it's grassland now, but you may think long-term. You may think, well, you know, I'd really like shade. I'd really love to see evergreens and trees in here. In which case, you might want to start thinking big now, but always start small. Like, you don't want to get overwhelmed by huge plants. It just helps you to have a sense of a vision. It helps give you a guide as to like how you're gonna create. But for now, let's say grassland, because we're like, how much sunlight do you get? This is a cloudy day. We took this picture. What's the sun usually like here?
Yeah, we get quite a lot of sun. So the house is north facing. So it gets sun most of the day, apart from right up by the house where there's just sort of shade from the house and the trees that are the neighbors' trees and stuff. But yeah, quite a lot of sun. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see like in the front of the house, you have some shrubs there. that's facing north. Maybe that wall of your house doesn't get sun, but then most of the yard would get sun most of the day. And there also aren't tall trees very close to your area. So yeah, you're gonna have plenty of sun. You're saying a full sun environment. And how much water? Like, do you see water puddling after rainfall, or what's it like moisture wise?
Yeah, very little actually. I think we're at the top of our block, and so the water tends to like flow down the street. So yeah, not very often.
Yeah, I think, and when we were there, we looked like over the fence. There's a rock wall and a drop down. So this is a little bit of a terrace, which our yard also, Natalie and mine is terraced. And the water does drain right out. Like, it rains and then very, very quickly. It can dry up surprisingly quickly even after heavy rainfall. So I would think you're going to do well with dry or medium plants that like full sun. And when Natalie and I looked at this, we're like thinking all the things you could do. What's wonderful about this is you just have a blank slate. Like, all you need to do is take out some grass and you could get started anywhere in this yard. You don't have, like, let's say, you know, a forest of bamboo that's consuming your yard that has to be removed. So this just makes all sorts of potential for what kind of shape you want to create. So looking at going into, you know, like I looked around Prairie Nursery, I looked around just our own yard and knowing what has worked for Natalie and me, and came up with essentially, it's like, think of it as a recipe for what could work in this. And what we really focused on right away was just this stone circle, which is already separated out. It already gives you a bed. You don't have to even take out grass. You might have to remove there might be some weeds in there. You maybe have to clear out some plants there, but this is like a weekend project. So when it comes to getting started, like, that's a perfect place to just focus in, chip off a little bit of the yard that is a nice central focus, and learn from it. And that's what Natalie and I have been doing for 6 years. It's just a little bit at a time, chip off a piece and learn. And what we envisioned was something like this, and naming the plants that can work in this environment that we believe would be a good fit here. And these are the scientific names, which is a good idea to get familiar with because the scientific names are very precise. The common names can be misleading. Like, there are many plants that are called Coreopsis, but there's only one specific that's called Coreopsis lanceolata. Do be aware there are hybrids of plants as well. I just realized as I'm saying that a little bit of extra flavor to it is that some plants will have, after the name, they'll have var and some other name, which is a hybrid variety. Ideally, we want to just get like the straight native plants that don't have that var, and they're not a hybrid. They haven't been bred specifically. So we're getting the plants that are more like the ones the insects have been eating for the past thousands of years. So anyway, just to talk about the thought process here, this Pacera aurea is called golden groundsel, and that's this like greenish, well, greenish, of course it's a plant, but it's the ground cover here at the bottom. This plant provides yellow in the spring, very beautiful daisy-like flowers in the spring, and then settles down for the rest of the year to be just a low ground cover, which fills in readily and helps, as I described, it's like your green mulch, right? It helps protect the soil from drying out. Medium tier, we have Coreopsis, lance-leaf Coreopsis, which blooms throughout the summer. Makes, you know, about 2 feet tall or so, and for a couple of months produces these like pretty yellow flowers. Also a little bit taller here is Echinacea, purple coneflower, another name for that. It gives a little height, gives a little color contrast. That blooms middle summer as well and towards later summer. And these that give some shape. These are the Liatris spicata, this one, also known as dense blazing star, creates a nice vertical accent and another pop of purple color, and that blooms more in the fall. So we're talking about yellows in the spring, yellows and violets in midsummer, and then in the fall, this violet color and shape. Also, showy goldenrod. Solidago is the goldenrod. There are many different types of goldenrod. I don't actually have this one pictured here. It blooms yellow in the fall and would give another contrast of yellow to this dense blazing star. So ideally, plants from blooming in the spring, blooming in the summer, blooming in the fall, and all this information you can find when you're looking in, for example, the online nurseries. They have this and other resources, which I've also mentioned, that are on nativegardenguide.org. We're just about at an hour. Phil, Penelope, thank you so much for being the guinea pigs, and we're happy to help with questions as you go, or any assistance in getting that going.
We're so
you so much.
excited. We're so excited. Thank you.
Great,
Ready to
thank you.
go.
I would love to see it. I'd definitely love to see it and help you guys out. So just let us know. And some more resources here. Native Garden Guide. That some of the Amanda's Native Garden is another. This is a local online nursery, and it's my first choice. If I can get the plants there, I will get them. They're in New York State. Audubon Society has a list, like a database where you can get plants from your region, or learn what are the best plants for our region. Xerces Society, mentioned Westchester Community College. Oops. They're a little hard to pin down. I'm always struggling to find like where exactly is their website. They sort of just announce online on social media like, hey, the plant sale's coming. And I missed it one year because I just wasn't paying attention. Winter sowing, that's more like an advanced technique. I do that a lot and I really love it. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask after this. Also, a nursery that I found locally, Nature's Cradle Nursery, is in Eastchester. They've been able to source plants that I couldn't find elsewhere, and I just asked them for the plant. They can find it because they reach out to a number of local nurseries as well. So that's really been helpful for me to find some of the specifics that I'm looking for. And Natali and I, we're happy to help. We're happy to answer questions. If anyone from this event goes out and starts planting some native plants, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to see a picture of your yard, and we're happy to answer any questions. So if you shoot, this is my email. Natali will see this as well. Definitely stay in touch. Happy to hear what grows out of this. No pun intended. That was terrible, but I had to say it. And thank you all. This is our front yard, and that's Boris, our cat, the ex-infamous Boris.
Mark, there were a couple of questions as
Yes.
we were talking. One was about what can we talk about our lawn, whether or not it's native, and also is there a native lawn grass that we're using?
Our lawn is a work in progress. Mostly we're taking it out. We're chipping away at it a bit at a time. Every year we clear out another bed. We will keep some lawn. I do like the idea of grass, sort of a grass path flowing through. It is not native. I honestly don't even know what's in there a lot of times. I think we have some Asian grasses. Of course, there's some basic fescue grass, which is the standard. But we have allowed one plant to grow that I know is native. That is one of the few horizontally spreading native grasses. It's called Nimblewill. And that's spelled like it sounds, nimble, N-I-M-B-L-E, will, W-I-L-L. And there aren't too many grasses that grow in North America that spread horizontally through rhizomes the way, or runners, the way that the European grasses do. We have more prairie grasses that grow in clumps and then tend to leave space and grow another clump, and they spread by seed. Nimblewill is one of the few that does spread horizontally by runners and will fill in an area pretty readily. If you Google it, you will find many sites telling you to kill it because it's considered to be a weed. But that's the part I love about it, because it spreads on its own. I don't have to tend to it. It also survives July drought-like conditions with absolutely no problem.
But it goes dormant in the winter, right?
It grows dormant in the winter. It goes dormant in winter. So it will be like a straw color in the winter. Again, to me, that's what plants do in our part of the world. And I don't need an evergreen lawn. So I'm happy with it. Every year it spreads a little bit more, and I'm very content to let it spread and fill in. There's also sedge is another alternative. We're trying out sedge actually for the first time in one area of our garden. I have not gotten to sedge as much as I would like to. So I can't talk so much about it, but it is an alternative to lawn grass.
There was another question about what we do with leaf mulch.
Leaves, as much as possible, just let them fall and stay where they are. And ideally, like leave them where they are. Leave the leaves, let nature be natural. That's not always practical, especially if you do like having some grass and you don't want that smothered by leaves. We rake leaves into our garden beds up to about maybe like 6 inches in depth. The plants grow right through them. That has not caused any problem with plants being smothered. They're used to it. Any woodland plant expects to be covered in leaves in the winter and actually benefits from that. So having more flower beds just makes it easier. The more the leaves just land and sit there, the easier it is for us. I don't actually like shred leaves other than on our lawn. Like some areas of lawn we do want to keep. And in that case, I'll just use the mulch mower, just basically our mower with a mulch plug. Don't collect the leaf clippings, just let the mower shred the leaves. And that will, it's effectively like fertilizer for your lawn, natural fertilizer. And will break down and be beneficial to the lawn. But even better than that is if you make that areas under your trees flower beds and let the leaves just stay there through the winter. Other questions? You got the Facebook groups. Also on the web pages that I mentioned, Native Garden Guide, we have the Facebook groups linked there, and on Healthy Yards New Rochelle site. Natali, did you put in the links to those sites?
I'll do it right now.
Yeah, thank you. What about native bulbs? I see we don't have many. Yeah, that's one thing. There aren't too many. What did I just put in? Now I'm forgetting. There was a plant I put in. I think, Amy, you've also put these in. I want to say.
I mean, there's trout.
Was it
very
trout lily or trillium or?
What are they called? The spring ephemerals. They're very subtle in the early spring. There's some beautiful things, but most of them are not. They're not a lot of native.
Yeah, yeah, there aren't.
Or they're quite obscure.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate that the Northeast, our plants are like, I don't know, they're not so showy. Our plants are like tough. It reminds you of like the stereotype of like, American pioneers. They have to be ready for winter versus tropical plants that make these amazing, beautiful, brilliant flowers. But you got to take them out because they won't last through the winter. Like a lot of tulips don't necessarily, dahlias, things like this. Amazing flowers, but not necessarily so hardy. Right. We have plants that are ready to make it through freezing conditions. So I think they're a little more conservative in their showing off. Any other questions? I'm just checking.
Mhm.
Let me
Yeah,
make a
no,
comment. Mark, thank you so
Sure.
much. But one of the things to be aware of, I think people are curious about how much do I plant, garden design, things like that. And I think if you look at some of the nursery websites, they have nice diagrams, or may have nice diagrams of if you have a plot that's 3x3 or 6x6 or whatever, you can find some nice ideas of how to group plants, but you also want to make sure you get what's appropriate for your area. And I liked with Penelope and Philip starting small, because we can get so overwhelmed. When we got started, we put in 500 plugs and 40 plants, and it was like, what have we done? I don't know if I would do that again. We worked with a professional, and I think I shared some information with Mark and Natali that if you want to redo your whole yard at once, you can figure on 2,000 to 4,000 for design, 5,000 to get help to clear it and maybe plant. And by the time you're done with plants to redo your whole yard, you could easily be talking, $7,000 to $15,000. And a lot of us can't do that. And then who's going to maintain it? So start small. And again, I think that's where Penelope and Philip, who are a bit newer to this, have really worked with Mark and Natali to show, yeah, okay, this can be done, and next year we'll add and we can grow from there. So don't be scared, don't be overwhelmed. Take the information provided, think, and then as Mark mentioned, we have a Garden Buddy program, and we're happy to come out and share ideas. I have one garden buddy who in a year and a half has replanted a nice portion of his yard, and he got his plants from me. A lot of us have plants to give away too. Not ad infinitum, but we are also happy to share plants with people that we're working with.
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
that was fantastic, Mark. That was great, Bob. I'd add one other piece, which is we have garden tours, or we meet in each other's backyards. So one of the best ways to learn is to go to each other's yards and see what other people have done. So like, I love to go to Mark and Natali's yard, to Bob's, and people have done it totally different, and you get all kinds of ideas. And I would say I'm more in the Mark and Natali camp than the Bob camp. I've slowly done it myself. So I dig up bits of my grass, and like what Penelope's front lawn looks like, I've replaced all of that with native bushes and ground cover, because that was easy. I didn't want to be like having plants in the front, but it took me years, and I slowly put things in and dig them up. So there's lots of ways to come see our yards if you live locally, or even if you don't, we put it on Facebook and we look at each other's yards. It's a great way to learn. That was terrific, Mark and Natali.
Yeah, and Amy is co-president of Healthy Yards New Rochelle. I might add, we had talked about, and I am planning in the spring to do a lawn removal, smothering with cardboard, not a large area, a smaller area, how to take out your lawn or kill it, what plants might fit where, and just how it might work. So look for an announcement on that. Again, don't get overwhelmed, just a step at a time. As Amy said, it can take years to get where you want to be. And then you'll find that there's always more to do. So.
Well, let's not be too discouraging. Like we showed the before and after pictures, and that's about a 5-year span. But even in the first and second year, there's so many beautiful things that happen. And the garden just gives you back. Once you put in the plants, you give them a chance, they reward you. And every year, Natali and I look at our garden and we're like, wow, it's so full now. And then the next year, it's more full. We're like, it's even more full this year. And then the next year, even more full in new plants. So it just continues to grow and build over time. It's always a very rewarding process.
Well, this was great. I'm very inspired. I think we've answered all the questions, and there've been great comments. Thank you to everyone who has been putting comments all along in the chat. A lot of great tips and resources. And really, Mark and Natalie, thank you so much for sharing. Bob, as always, thank you for making this happen. Fellow librarians, thank you for joining us. We had a really nice crowd tonight, and I hope everyone found this as inspiring as I did.
I have one quick question. Are all the Healthy Yards separate organizations, the different locations, towns?
Some cities have them and many do not. It's basically a group that was started up in Bedford so many years ago, and other cities have taken it on. New Rochelle. We work with Pelham a bit. They have a group. I believe Larchmont and Mamaroneck are doing something. Other cities are trying to get started. So it's kind of hit or miss. But the parent organization was started in Bedford. Our group started during COVID with 5 of us, and now we have an email distribution of over 300 and a Facebook of probably close to that. So we're growing every year. We attend events such as Earth Day events with New Rochelle, street fairs, you name it. We're trying to get out and about. Our big goal is don't use pesticides, don't use chemicals, plant natives, pollinator plants, start making steps, even small ones, to promoting a healthier environment. We have virtual talks. We try to do it at least a quarter, if not more. We've had talks by a toxicologist on pesticides, how to establish a bird-friendly garden. Our last talk was on invasives, what they are, how to get rid of them. Mark and Natalie this evening. So we try to reach out to the community, spread the word, and provide useful information to all. I put our email address in there if you'd like to get on our distribution or have a request or need a little help or have a question. So please let us know.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, well, thank you again. I do see the next topic. Somebody just suggested they'd love to have a talk in the future on rainwater harvesting. So something to think about.
That's great.
Yeah, and Henry Tuckahoe Eastchester does. I think they're trying to get one started along with maybe Greenberg, but if you send a note, we can try to get you hooked up with the right people.
Also, if you look at, there's kind of complementary organizations. So if you go online and look at Westchester Pollinator Pathways or the Westchester Healthy Yards, there's a list of the contact person in each community so that who kind of organizes pollinator pathways. So that's a way to find them in your community. So go on Westchester website for Google Healthy Yards Westchester, and you'll see there's lists of the pollinator people, and there's lots of towns.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you again for attending, and everyone, keep checking your library's websites for more programs like this. Beautiful thing. And really thank you, Mark and Natalie, for so generously giving of your time and your expertise. And the beautiful thing we all know about public libraries, everything is free. So take advantage of your library.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
Bob.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.